The history of the medical sciences is chock full of radical and innovative ideas. Most of them turn out to be bunk. Some are harmful and others downright abusive. But every so often a radical idea comes along that turns the medical community on its ear and leads to a myriad of understandings and innovations. Things like leeches and healing crystals are bunk. The germ theory of disease literally changed the world. Accidentally growing mold in a petri dish alters the future of medicine. Sadly, this video will focus more on the negatives, and that's because when a radical idea is truly helpful, it quickly becomes commonplace. Today, doctors have multiple different ways of looking inside of our body: X-rays, MRIs, CT scans, fiber optics. This is a truly remarkable thing that seems completely normal to us. So let's begin by talking about one of the worst examples of a radical idea. Let's talk about Walter Jackson Freeman II. He was a man who promised to be able to cure a wide variety of mental disorders like epilepsy, strokes, and other things. He was aware of a procedure called a lobotomy. It's a brain surgery where the patient's prefrontal cortex is separated from the rest of the brain. And he had what today we might call a hold my beer moment. Freeman created a version of the procedure that's now known as an ice pick lobotomy. That's because he took a giant metal spike and he threaded it just past the patient's eyes up into the corner of the eye socket. Then he took a hammer and smashed it through the front of the skull. He would then take the spike and wiggle it around to shred that part of the brain. Simple. So simple, in fact, you could basically do it out of the back of a van. No, really. He bought a van and he toured the country doing thousands of these procedures. He took literally brain surgery and reduced it to something on the level of a traveling vacuum salesman. So how did this innovation age? Well, about as well as the carton of milk that I left in the fridge for well over a year in college. Today, he is rightly considered a stain on medical history. That's because his patients often suffered irreversible personality changes and memory loss. Some of them had to relearn how to use the toilet. And those are the lucky ones. About 15% of his patients died. This story is a cautionary tale about radical ideas. It's so easy to get swept up in the hype when someone comes up with a new, quicker, or easier way to do something. He was incredibly popular at the time, and Freeman's patients included President JFK's younger sister. Yes, it's easy to get swept up in the hype, but a lot of the time what we really should be doing is turning and walking away. I'm happy to report that on the other side of this absurdly long J-cut is a slightly less disturbing example. How about this? In the early 1800s, there were huge gaps in our knowledge of how parts of the body functioned, including the digestive system. Which leads us to the next radical idea: to actually observe. In this case, I'm talking about a man named Alexis St. Martin who suffered a gunshot wound in his stomach that never healed over. As a result, a doctor was able to observe the digestion of food merely by looking into his stomach and seeing the process live, which led to several important discoveries. In fact, this turned out to be so valuable to science that, when St. Martin died, his family didn't bury him until he'd begun to decompose, specifically to thwart scientists who wanted to steal his body and study him even more. And of course, there have been many unusual and radical tools created for medical and medical-adjacent purposes. For example, when I was a child, I was told quite often that popping my knuckles would lead to arthritis later in life. But in the Middle Ages, the exact opposite belief was held. These devices had a hole into which you could slip your finger and a claw-like base for you to rest on a tabletop. The claw was designed to dig into the wood, giving you a strong and solid base. People using this were often very arthritic, so that was important. You could then quickly yank the top and elongate all the joints in one finger at once. Doing this quickly enough was believed to be an effective cure for arthritis, which they thought was caused by a buildup of humors in the joints. This exercise was supposed to break through those buildups. As you can imagine, there are a lot of stories of broken fingers. Or take these scary-looking instruments. This kit was used for the grisly practice of trepination, another radical idea where a hole was drilled into a patient's skull and left there. At times, it was believed that this would relieve swelling on the brain, and in other times that it would allow evil spirits to escape. Either way, it is a hard pass for me. A lesser presenter would end this segment with a joke, maybe something like, "I need this treatment like I need a hole in the head." But not me. Which brings us to this new experimental treatment, one that is very near and dear to my head. You may not have noticed because of how well I hide it, but the fact is I am starting to go a little thin on the top. This medicine promises to restore me to my former glory without surgery or harsh laxatives or ruinous medical bills. According to this radical idea, what I really need is the correct superheated infusion of free radicals and tannin. Made from the estafa herb that grows on the eastern slopes of the Andes and using a delivery system that's been perfected long ago, this tea promises to be just the solution that I need. The directions say to pour boiling water over the sachet and let it sit for a few minutes, so that's exactly what I'm about to do. Be safe. Keep children away from prescription medication. No. I won't know right away if there's any basis to this claim. Even according to the manufacturer's most optimistic projections, it could be several weeks before I see any actual evidence of growth. So, I encourage you to watch my next several videos very carefully. So is this a medical miracle or just mere quackery? I don't know. But I do know that sometimes tomorrow's medical breakthroughs are laughed at today, just like tomorrow's most dismal failures are laughed at today. If I've learned one thing in making these videos, is that I should only believe that for which I have evidence. So, I'm going to drink this, and I'm going to see what, if any, evidence sprouts. Tastes like optimistic skepticism, and that is absolutely an idea worth exploring.